Best Book Bits podcast brings you Bob Burg, international best-selling author and co-author of the Go Giver book series, Hall of Fame speaker, sales and referral authority. Bob, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Michael. Great to be with you.
No worries. Now, for my audience who don't know you, tell us a little bit about sort of your story and your journey so far of how you came to be where you are today.
Began as a broadcaster, first in radio and then television. Wasn't particularly good at that, and it wasn't long before I graduated into sales. The challenge was that I knew nothing about sales on a formal level. And the company where I was working, I'm not sure they did either because we had no training. So I was sort of on my own. And I floundered for the first, I guess, few months or so until I found a couple of books on selling. This is almost 40 years ago. And at that time, they weren't as prevalent as they are now. So I just happened to be in the bookstore looking for something. And I saw a couple of great, well, I didn't know they were great books, but they turned out to be great life-changing books for me. One was by Zig Ziglar, the other was by Tom Hopkins. And I studied the books, and my sales began almost right away, taking off and doing great. So I began really studying sales and really personal development, because that's what so much of it is. Success is building ourselves on the inside first, and then it manifests itself outwardly. And as I grew in my sales career, I ended up being sales manager of another company and began teaching others what was working for me. And one thing led to another. And so I began speaking on the topic for different companies and so forth. And I've been doing that now for a little more than 30 years, I think.
Yeah, well, awesome. Yeah, take us back. Whereabouts did you grow up in your younger years?
Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts in the northeastern United States. Cold weather, so I always say I grew up in Massachusetts, but got down to Florida as fast as I could because it's nice and sunny and warm down here. And when we're not having hurricanes, it's just a great place to live. It may not be paradise, but it's close enough.
Yeah, perfect. And what made you get into broadcasting? You said that was your first sort of gig. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I was athletic as a kid, and I wanted to either be a professional athlete, which I wasn't good enough to be, or a broadcaster, a sportscaster, which I thought I was good enough to be, but I really wasn't. But it was something I enjoyed, and it worked out well because where I worked both in radio and then television, they were small stations. And at a small station, you've got to know how to do everything. You learn pretty much how to do every aspect of putting together a story and a broadcast. So that really helped me as I was in my speaking career, as I would, in writing books, as I would do interviews and do a lot of media. It helped me to really understand the medium itself. So, everything for a purpose.
Yeah, so the speaking career came out of being a broadcaster, and I know
really
you've
out
been
of being a salesperson, I think, more than anything.
Okay, yeah, got it. No problem at all. When did you write your first book? Tell us about that journey, and how did that come to be? What motivated you to sort of sit down and say, "Hey, I'm going to put all my thoughts together and write my first book"?
Well, in the early 90s, I guess it was, early to mid 90s, I'd been speaking for a few years, and I'd had this is how long ago it was, a cassette tape album, right? Because back then, that's what they were. They were cassette tapes. It's how long ago. And I'd receive a fee from stage, and I'd also sell tapes. So I was making a living from it. I was starting within a few years. I had a successful and fairly profitable speaking business, and but I was really ready to take it to that next level. And I was at a National Speakers Association meeting, and a couple of the older, wiser, more learned speakers just said to me, Burg, you really should write a book on your topic because it's going to help position you in the marketplace better. You're going to be able to get higher fees. You'll be more desirable, more easily booked. You can utilize it as a, and I did. I thought that was good advice. So the first book, which was called Endless Referrals, the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sale, which was really a book on networking and earning referrals. And, back then, again, this is a long time ago. This was back in the day where there were probably 3 books out there on the topic of networking, and one of them was mine. Now there's hundreds of books on networking, and most of them are wonderful. I read as many of them as I can, and I learned something from all of them. But back then, it just wasn't as prevalent. And so that first book was utilitarian. It was simply because it was a positioning tool for me. I think every book I wrote after that was because I felt I had a message I wanted to share. And The Go-Giver came about because the Endless Referrals, which was a how-to book, really on helping entrepreneurs and salespeople who knew they had a great product or service. They knew it brought lots of value to their customers and clients, but they may not have been comfortable or confident in going out into their local communities and building the kinds of relationships that would cause people to want to do business with them directly and or through referral. So Endless Referrals was a how-to book in that regard. But I'd always read business parables and always enjoyed them because, as you know, stories kind of connect on a deeper level with people and more of a heart-to-heart level. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic premise of Endless Referrals, which is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust, which that's been sort of my signature statement, if you will, for over 30 years. If we could take that and put that into a parable. And so I kind of asked myself, well, so what is the essence of that entrepreneur or salesperson who's able to quickly and sustainably create those relationships? And it's that they're givers. They're always focused on giving value to others. So, we called it the Go-Giver. But the best thing I did for that book was asking John David Mann, who was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for. I used to submit a monthly article to his magazine. He had, at the time, he wasn't as well known as he is now. But back then, he was still very busy. But he was very well known in his niche as a brilliant writer, right? And so not many people knew him. But fortunately, I did. And I asked John if he, would listen to this idea I had about a parable based on the Endless Referrals concepts and so forth. And fortunately, he said yes. And then, we ended up working on it. And we did go through 25 rejections from New York publishing houses. But finally, we found the perfect publishing partner, which was Portfolio, a business book division of Penguin Random House.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, talk about obviously putting together the right team and partnership, but putting yourself into positions where you can have a partner that reflects your values as well. So yeah, congratulations on that. I want to segue back to your first book, Endless Referrals. I know you did it back in 1994 and pre-internet days, mind you, as well.
Right.
Do the same principles still apply? 2021, fast forward with the internet, do those principles apply, or how have you sort of changed your approach with referrals? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The principles always apply. That's why they're principles. Universal laws, principles, they're the same. Always have been, are now. I'm sure always will be. Now, strategies change, tactics change, techniques change. Sure, the internet has allowed us access to people we may never have had the opportunity to have access to, and so forth. But it's still all about creating that relationship. It's still all about the know, like, and trust. I often say that we were talking about all things being equal, right? People do business with, refer business to, not computers, right? Not social media platforms, but the people who are behind them. So sure, while there's many now different ways to be able to relate to, connect with, add value to others as you're building that relationship, it's still, it's still, the principles still apply.
Yeah. How did you become a Hall of Fame speaker? How does one become a Hall of Fame speaker? Did someone have to put in 30 years like yourself? Or?
No, there's people who've done it in a lot less time. With me, I kind of joked that it was more of a lifetime achievement award than it was anything spectacular that I did, because, there's people who maybe have been in the business 5, 10, 15 years who got that. I think I was in 29. I think mine was 29. So really 30 years it took me until finally I was awarded that, which I didn't know until the process, where they tell you you've been nominated and so forth. But before then, I didn't even think about it. I didn't think about anyone nominating me. I don't think done particularly anything special in terms of the speaking world over the past few years. So it was really, that's why I say it was more of a lifetime achievement as opposed to me doing anything, specific in the business.
You must have had some amazing experiences being on stage with some of the greats. What is some of your stories? Or I know you mentioned Tom Hopkins before and Zig Ziglar, some of my mentors. I know I'm a bit younger than yourself, but still I've read all their books and done all their summaries as well. So fantastic guys. So tell us about some stories and some people that you've shared the stage with.
Yeah, I've shared the stage with Zig and with Tom. And I'll tell you what's really interesting. Well, I don't know if you know that Zig, before he passed, he had a very serious head injury. And so the last couple of years when he spoke, he lost pretty much all his short-term memory. So when he would speak the last couple of years, his daughter Julie or his son Tom would appear on stage with him, and they would sort of ask him questions, and they'd keep him on track when he'd be repeating himself and so forth. I mean, it was such a beautiful thing to watch because he handled himself with such dignity, and they treated him with such respect and kindness, and it was really a beautiful thing to see. I think it was maybe the second or third year after The Go-Giver came out, and we wanted to award Zig the Lifetime Go-Giver Achievement Award because he certainly embodied, that. And so I used to have an event that we'd hold yearly, and so we invited Zig to speak on stage, and Zig came on stage with his wife, Mrs. Ziegler, the redhead, and his son Tom. And so we presented him the award. But another person on stage who was part of the Ziegler organization, Howard Partridge, had and we had set this up beforehand. He asked me. He was familiar with a story I would tell. We have this on my LinkedIn page, I think, where I imitated Zig from stage. I listened to his back then tapes so many times when I first got into sales. I could do his whole series, and I can do his voice. And so they had me on stage. I was doing I did a segment from one of Zig's tapes on stage in front of Zig. And even though, again, his memory wasn't really quite there, he knew what was going on and he understood what I was doing, and you could tell he really enjoyed it. And, his son Tom and Mrs. Ziegler, certainly did. And that was one of the greatest experiences I've had, just one of the biggest honors I've had, to actually be on stage with the master himself, Mr. Zig Ziglar, and getting to imitate him right in front of him.
Yeah, wow, that would have been an amazing experience. Thanks for sharing that story. Did you ever know Jim Rohn back in the day?
Yeah, I appeared with Jim a couple of times. In fact, we were just talking about him on a Clubhouse session this morning because Kyle Wilson, who was his business partner for, I think, the last 25 years or so of Jim's life, and really is the one who brought Jim back into the limelight. There was sort of a special program on Jim this morning. And Kyle was sharing a bunch of stories, and I was in the audience, and they pulled me up to give a couple of my experiences with Jim. So I appeared with Jim on a special. This is back in the early 2000s. They had a big event with, let's see, Jim Rohn was there, Tony Jerry, Zig Ziglar, Charlie Tremendous Jones, Jeffrey Gitomer, myself. A few others, and I'm just not thinking of all the names, but it was a massive program over the course of 3 days, and it was just a joy to watch Jim speak, as it always is, and just to be able to be on a panel with him and with Charlie Jones and with Gitomer, and just some of my real heroes and people who I've just enjoyed and learned so much from over the years. And then I spoke with Jim at another conference which was for a private company. And so, and Jim was such a wise man, and a very gentle man, and just very, he was, you look at him and Zig Ziglar on stage, and they're kind of diametric opposites, right? Where Jim sort of stands at the lectern and just talks in a very calm, and he's just Jim Rohn, and he gives just gems and gems and gems. And then there's Zig, who's all over the place and is on one knee, and then he's over here, and and gives gem after gem after gem after gem, right? So you get different styles, And yet you see these masters at work, and you're just like, wow, how could people?
What's your style? What's your style, Bob? Are you a bit of both?
I'm probably a bit more all over the place type.
Yeah.
Just not as good at it as Zig.
Yeah.
Zig's in a whole other a whole other stratosphere. But yeah, I'm too hyper to just stand at the lectern.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we could talk about, obviously, that for years. But now you've been named one of the most influential leaders. Now, in your opinion, what makes a great leader and some great qualities that leaders possess?
I think really good leaders have very much a focus on those they're leading. It's not about them. It's really about the others. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think you see that, in Jim Collins' book, if you're familiar with that, it was called Good to Great. And it was really one of the best books on leadership I've ever read in my life. And one of the things he talked about was the difference between level 4 leaders and level 5 leaders. Now, both were great, okay? As far as talent goes, both of them, there was no significant difference, right? Probably no difference at all in terms of the talent of the leader. Yeah. What was different was that with the level 4 leader, it was about them. They were the celebrity. It was about them, and they got the credit, and it was, they made the big. With the level 5 leader, it was all about those they were leading. It was making it about them. It was making sure they got the credit while the level 5 leader took the responsibility or the blame when things went wrong. It was about putting those they lead into the spotlight. It was about advancing those they lead and the organization. So I think that's really the biggest thing about a really effective leader. That their interest is in others. I always say, be self-motivated, but other-focused.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, well said. I'm going to change gears a little bit. Now, you're an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system. What does this mean to the average person? Can you talk a little bit about that, the free enterprise system?
Well, unfortunately, to the average person, it's much more confusing than it should be because it's really very simple. Free enterprise or capitalism really is just an expression of liberty. An expression of freedom. Liberty can be defined as, the right to live one's life, however and in whatever way they see fit in their pursuit of happiness, providing, of course, that they don't infringe upon the rights of anyone else to do the same. Okay? Capitalism or free markets is simply the economic expression of such. Okay, so it means that so long as this business is not committing force or fraud, which is an infringement upon the rights of others, they have the right to operate their business as they see fit, and people have the right to do business with them or not do business with them. Okay, so when we have that kind of environment, and we never have, no country ever has totally. Okay, but to the degree that a country comes closer, to that, that's the degree that the masses of people are much better off. They're healthier. They live longer. They have more in order to be able to fulfill their goals and their values. The poor in a free market-based environment is much better off than the poor and often even middle class in less free environments. Unfortunately, many people, at least here in the States, they confuse free market capitalism with something called cronyism or corporatism. And that is where big organizations, whether it's big industries or other special interests, they basically, through their lobbyists, they buy special favors, rules, and regulations from politicians. It's really a horrible game that's played. And it's unfair. It makes it unfair. It's not free market, okay? And yet people think that's what capitalism is, or that's what free markets are. Of course, it's just the opposite of such. That confusion causes people to think capitalism or free markets don't work. they're unfair. No, free markets, capitalism is the most fair because it means, remember, in a free market-based economy, no one has to buy from anyone else. No one has to do business with anyone else. No one has to buy. The only way someone will buy from you in a free market-based economy is if they feel that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. Yeah. What cronyism does is it stifles competition. In a free market, since anyone can compete, that's what makes it so that consumers have many, many, many more choices. It's actually not much more complicated than that.
Yeah. But thanks for sharing. I know I've been following your stuff for a while, and I read about that, so I wasn't too sure what you meant when you said about the free enterprise system. But thank you for clearing that up. Now, I've got a dog. I know you're an animal lover. You've served on the board of the Animal Adoption Clinic. What's the story behind this?
I've always loved animals. We grew up with dogs, always had more than one dog at a time. And I just have always loved animals. Now I lost, unfortunately, my cat that I had for quite a while. And so now we foster kittens that have been rescued until we find forever homes for them and so forth. But dogs, cats, I love all animals. Any animal. To me, their hearts are pure. There's no evil in them. They do what they do often out of instinct. And at the same time, they have feelings, and they know who loves them, and they know who. And it really bothers me the way that human beings, not all, of course, but how many human beings treat animals. I think it's a human crime, and I just feel very strongly about that we need to respect. We need to respect all living creatures to the degree that we can, and live our lives that way.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, thank you for your work on that. I'm an animal lover myself, so that's great. Now, I know you've been around, and we talked about Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, but you're one of the few who's actually transitioned really, really great online, and you've got some amazing courses out there and an amazing website. Talk about some of your courses and digital products that you do at the moment.
Well, we have, and the most exciting thing to me right now, and I just enjoy it so much personally, is that we have a membership community called the Go-Giver Success Alliance, where we meet once a week on Zoom for an hour. And these are, some very, very successful people. And we call it a mentorship community. But it's not that I'm the mentor. I'm the guide maybe, but I'm not the mentor. We've got so many successful people, we all mentor each other. And the discussion that goes on, the learning, the discussing, the strategizing, the collaborating, and just really the great relationship building is so very inspiring. And then during the week, we have things we post within the group. It's on the Mighty Networks, so it's not a Facebook or anything like that. It's a whole private platform. But that is just a blast. And then we have some courses such as the Endless Referrals, the Go Giver Way, 9.5-hour online course. And we have one on selling the Go Giver Way, which is about an hour and 45 minutes. So, we enjoy putting those together.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and for anyone that wants to check them out, where can they find that? What's the website they can check that out?
Yeah, Burg, Burg.com. And if they scroll down, they'll see a coffee shop. It looks like a few people at a coffee shop, which, of course, if you've read the book, The Go-Giver, it's Rachel's famous coffee. But if they haven't read the book, that wouldn't mean anything. So, but click on that photo, on that graphic, and it will take you to the Go-Giver Success Alliance page. And then there's others that say Work with Bob, and they can click on that, and it will open up a whole bunch of resources.
Yeah, great. And you're also a podcaster yourself. You've got a couple hundred episodes out there. When did you start to podcast it?
Had to be about 5 years ago, and I've actually just stopped doing it. So we're keeping the archives up forever.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we're keeping that up, but it just, something had to go in terms of time. and I started to just not, I love all the guests that I've had but it's a lot of work doing it's a lot of work doing a podcast. And so it was one of those things that was bringing me less enjoyment based on all the time I had to put into it and based on other things that I kind of needed and wanted to be doing. And so we've stopped doing that now. But as you said, there's a couple hundred episodes up there or whatever there are. And so plenty in the archives for people who want to binge listen to them.
Any highlights or any sort of one story or one guest that stands out for yourself?
There were so many with such inspiring stories. I think of Bobby Herrera, who's a great leader, has a big company now, but he came over from, I think his dad actually was a ranchero from Mexico who came over the States, and it took him years to get the opportunity to come in and do horrible work that you just would not want to do, but he so wanted to create a better life for his family. And Bobby and his brothers and sisters grew up very poor, struggling. So many great life lessons that he learned, but so many struggles. In fact, his book is called The Gift of Struggle, and Bobby now has a magnificent, very, very large company, a professional employment company. And, that to me was just such a wonderful conversation, because I just got to hear. And then, you hear about someone like Lisa Copeland, who began an automobile dealership because she was a very successful mortgage banker, but she went in to buy a car, and she was treated horribly by the salesperson, very sexist. And she said, no woman should ever have to go through this when buying a car. So she started a car dealership, and she became the biggest Alfa Romeo dealer in North America. Award-winning, the top one, right? And so, you talk to these people and you say, wow, it's just so inspiring to see what they've done and why they did it.
Yeah, that's great. Now, looking behind you, I know you've got an amazing library, and I'm sure you've read hundreds of books over your career.
Do too.
Now,
you have a great library. I'm looking at it back there. That's wonderful.
I've got 700 book summaries online that I've done video and audio and written for with the world's largest category. But that's okay. But I want to talk about sort of, if you were to give advice to sort of someone in their early 20s in their sales career, what are some of the maybe 1, 2, or top 3 sales books you would recommend from the past that you would recommend for them to read the basics and principles? I know I've got a couple. I'd love to hear your top 3.
Well, I think books such as Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is always something that's, everyone and anyone should have in their library and read over and over again. Books like Think and Grow Rich and The Magic of Thinking Big and The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles and As a Man Thinketh. And you've got, so many wonderful, magnificent books like that. In terms of sales, there's Zig's books and Tom's books. One book that most people don't know about, which is... it's a magnificent book. It was actually written in the 1960s by a hero of mine by the name of Harry Browne, Browne. And it was not meant to, he, by the way, published a number of New York Times best-selling books on economics, on politics, on philosophy, and so forth. But this one was not meant to be published. These were on a couple of hard drives he had. It's when he was training a sales team. And after he passed, in around 2006, I think it was, his wife, Pamela, his widow, she found the 2 hard drives with these 2 manuscripts, short manuscripts, and one was on understanding human nature, and the other was on relating this understanding of human nature to sales. And so she told someone about this, who told someone about it, who told someone who was an independent publisher, direct response marketer, and they published it under the title, The Secret of Selling Anything. And by the way, Harry, and they named it that, I guess, because Harry said in one part of the book, the secret of selling anything need not be a secret. The secret of selling anything is find out what the other person wants and help them to get it. Right, yeah. But the book to me is 2 books in one. One, again, it's just an absolute beautiful treatise on understanding and respecting human nature. Okay, dealing in truths, not trying to make people something they aren't, but respecting what is, and then going from there and making the situation more positive for everyone involved. And then that second part was sales, and it was, to me, one of the just best little kind of booklets, because they were, again, it's like 2 booklets in one book, but on sales, on how to sell. And if you just, and again, it's from the 60s, a little outdated in terms of some of the terminology, but wow, the principles are just absolutely brilliant. On my blog at burg.com/blog, I did a review on his book. And if anyone would like to read it, they can just go to burg.com/blog and then put in the search either Harry Browne, Browne, or The Secret of Selling, and it will take the person right to that.
Yeah, perfect. I'll put it in the show notes as well. And I know you've got to run. So before we wrap up, I do want to ask you one question. I ask all my guests this at the end. If you could host a dinner party with 3 people, famous from the past, alive or dead, who would they be, and what would you serve them?
It would be one would be Benjamin Franklin, one of the United States founding fathers.
Yep.
One would be Booker T. Washington, who was just an absolute wonderful teacher and mentor, and he was actually a former slave who became the founder of Tuskegee University, and a magnificent human being. Let's see, another one. Who would I have? Let's see. Oh dear, it's so hard to think, because there's so many who I would love to have. Maybe one of the Stoics. Yeah. Probably Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, that would be good.
Yeah.
And what would you serve him? Would you take him out, or would you host him and feed him yourself?
Well, I'd host them. I'd hope they'd enjoy the meal, because it would be something vegan.
Okay, perfect. That would be a great conversation. Benjamin Franklin, Booker T. Washington, and Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
Bob, I appreciate you coming on the show and taking your time out of your busy schedule as well. But if there was one last message you would leave my audience, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it has to do, I think it's a summation of something a mentor of mine told me, probably 40 years ago, soon after I had gotten in sales. And he had said to me, Burg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. When you hit the target, he said, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money. But always remember, that money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It isn't the target itself. Your target is serving others. And I think that's such a very important way to approach sales.
Perfect. Bob, thank you very much for being on the Best Book Bits podcast. And where can people find you online? I know you've got the best website name in the world, burg.com.
burg.com. Again, that's one of those blessings from being old. You kind of get in early on those things.
No worries. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for sharing some stories. To my audience, go follow this man, buy his books, check out his courses, join his academy. He's got a lot of great things online. Have a great day. Take care. See you soon. Okay.